Hi guys, so I'm going to finish off chapter 4 for you from where Mrs. Withers finished last time, and it starts with the diary of Claude Hestermeyer, um, which is the one we heard a bit of his diary extract before. Okay, so from the diary of Claude Hestermeyer. I backed towards the wall. I kept trying to speak, but no words would come. Claude, it's me, said Peter. No, I whispered. No, it can't be. Peter died. He died in front of me. Yes, I did, said Peter. Get out. Claude. Get out, I yelled. Whatever you are, get out. I reached for the first thing I could find, an ink pot. I hurled it at Peter but missed. The pot seemed to sail straight through him, spraying black ink against my books, my shelves, my floorboards. Somehow there wasn't a spot of ink on his crispy grey shirt. I stared at him in disbelief. I steadied myself against the desk. I must get some rest. I'm seeing things. No, Claude, I'm real, Claude, said Peter. Very real. Come, let me prove it to you. He held out his hand towards me. I hesitated, then took hold of it. His grip was firm, warm. But the ink pot, I said. It's just an ink pot. He placed his hand on top of the other one of mine. We are bonded, you and I. But you're an illusion. You're inside my head. You're not real. No, I'm real, and I'm inside your head, said Peter. I put myself there. Well, put yourself out again, I'd cried, wrenching my hand from his. I couldn't bear to look at him. His eyes were cold and distant, whereas Peter had been sweet and compassionate. Again, I'm afraid that's not how this arrangement works. I rummaged in my desk for the bottle I kept there. My head was swimming. Would you like some whiskey? I said, sitting down. Or would it pass straight through you? I'm afraid I wouldn't even be able to lift the glass, said Peter. Not unless you asked me to. I buried my head in my hands. My heart hammered painfully. You're real, but you're in my head. You're in my office, but not really here at all. And you can move things, but only if I tell you to. Peter nodded. You know what that means, don't you? I did know. I knew the signs better than anyone else. Before this fateful day, my research had focused on studying the history of the enemy. I sipped some whiskey and stared at the man who'd once been my best friend. It means I'm the vessel. Ooh, so that gives us a few clues about the story. So we've got Claude Hestermeyer, and this diary extract suggests that this Peter, this ghost, somehow that means that Claude Hestermeyer must be the vessel. Okay, chapter 5, Ellie's workshop. Ellie had grown up in her mother's workshop in the wealthier upper parts of the city. When she was 8, her mother had died, and Ellie and her brother had moved into the orphanage down on Orphanage Street. When she was 10, her brother had died, and Ellie had to move into the abandoned blacksmith's opposite to build a workshop of her own. It had been Castian's idea. The city needed someone to carry on Ellie's mother's work. Hannah Lancaster had been a genius, transforming the city with her inventions. By the time she died, the city relied on her machines to catch whales, gather oysters, filter seawater, and more besides. Ellie didn't know much about her mother's inventions, not really, but she knew more than most, so Castian had convinced the city councillors to pay her a small wage to keep the machines in working order, and to create her own inventions too. Ellie's first invention had been a small rocket, powered by gunpowder, which she had proudly demonstrated in the workshop in front of Castian and Anna, aiming it out of the open window. Her second invention had been a sprinkler system. The workshop was at street level, with a library in the loft and a small metalworks in the basement. It was a dizzying, confusing place, looking as it did like the insides of a busy and unfocused mind. It was a tall, unevenly shaped room, lined with shelves that towered to the rafters. The floor and the walls were wood-panelled, though a visitor would be forgiven for not realising this, since there was little wall or floor space that wasn't covered in some way. Despite the size of the workshop, it had a musty, close feel, smelling of damp and paint and old books. It creaked and groaned beneath its own weight. At no point did it appear to have been tidied. Discarded projects congregated in the corners, swept in that direction by the makers' changing moods, picked up months later, then thrown back again. Slab-like workbenches rose from the cluster of scrap metal, fallen paint pots and open books. Delicate instruments for charting the weather lay strewn carelessly around. Glass jars stood in ranks upon splintery shelves, filled with dead things floating in yellow liquids. The coiled intestines of a giant sea bass, the barbed tail of a stingray. Reams of ink-smudged papers trailed from walls of the floor, covered with drawings of bodies and faces and hands, of whales and icebergs and ships. Of things that wandered Emily's dream, and contraptions she built, or half-built, or would build, one day. The door to the street was a large oak-panelled shutter. Mounted above it was a stuffed sunfish, its mouth parted perpetually in a vacant O, its glass eye drooping slightly from its socket. The skeleton of a giant turtle hung from the ceiling on iron chains, suspended from the thick brass pipes of the water tank. In the back right corner, a spiral staircase curled towards the loft. A half-floor Ellie had built as a library to accommodate the many books her mother had left her. The collection had since swollen to twice its original size, so the shelves of the library were packed to bursting. On the ground floor, taking pride of place upon the central workbench, was a large harpoon gun. On the other benches was a brass telescope, a chemistry set, and a device that could generate electricity. Lying on the floor, meanwhile, were an open grate of fireworks, a working model of the solar system, and, tonight at least, Ellie, who was curled up asleep on a pile of maps. There was a knock at the door and she started to wake, spitting out a mouthful of her own hair. She hadn't dried it properly after being dropped into the sea, and it had become a messy tangle that scratched against her face, crunchy with sea salts. "Just a second," she cried. She had fallen asleep, fully dressed, while examining the layout of the city's sewers. She hobbled clumsily towards the door, cursing herself for having fallen asleep when there was a boy who needed her help. It was already dark outside the window. The knock came again, louder this time, as if someone were banging their whole head against the door. "I'm coming, Anna." Ellie set about undoing the many bolts on the front door, then rattled it along to one side on its metal wheels. There was a ripple of giggling, and 3 tiny figures hurried in from the darkness. They were followed by Anna, who nodded lazily to Ellie and slouched inside. "Hi," she said. The 3 younger orphans, Fry, Ibnet, and Sarah, ogled the workbenches with wide eyes. Within seconds there was a crunch of something breaking underfoot. "Watch where you're stepping," Ellie scolded. "Maybe if you cleaned up occasionally, you wouldn't have this problem," said Anna. "Don't you start. I've seen the state of your bedroom," said Ellie, rushing over to Ibnet, who was brushing his hair with a stuffed hedgehog. "I wish you'd warn me when you're bringing visitors." She pulled the hedgehog from the boy's grip. "Did you find anything out about the docks, by the docks?" "Yeah, I met this sailor called Darius, and he's going to teach me how to kill a seagull with just, No, I meant about Seth," Ellie said, whispering the name. "Oh, right, him. No, nothing. Don't touch those, Sarah." The orphans were standing on tiptoe to inspect the glass jars, marvelling at the dead things floating inside. Ellie glowered meaningfully at Anna. "I couldn't disappoint them," said Anna, picking up an apple from one of the workbenches. "They said they wanted to see what crazy old Ellie was up to." "Old? I'm the same age as you. Careful with that," she added. Fry had picked up a thick black clay tube from the ground, which had a whale carved on its side. She put the tube to her lips and blew. A horrible rasping sound trumpeted out the other end. The other 2 children covered their ears. "Look, I'm busy right now," said Ellie, snatching the tube from Fry's hand. "I have work to do." "You know you've got a sock in your hair, right?" said Anna, plucking it from on top of Ellie's head. "So have you figured out how to rescue Seth yet?" "Who says I'm planning to rescue him?" said Ellie. "It's obvious," said Anna, biting into her apple. "You've got that weird, wild look in your eye. You get it when you're about to start a work on a new invention." Ellie looked at the orphans to make sure they weren't listening. I've been thinking about it. She pointed to the open maps on the floor. There are sewer toils running right under St. Abram's Square, where Hargrath says the execution's going to be. It might be possible to get underneath the bonfire and rescue Seth from on top of it. Anna stared at Ellie, then spat out an apple pip. You are crazy. There's no way that'll work. Why do you even want to save him so much anyway? He didn't seem that interesting. Interesting? He'd just come out of a whale. How much more interesting do you want? They're going to kill him. If one of those orphans was drowning, you'd jump in to save them, right? Yeah, said Anna, but they're my orphans. He's not your responsibility. It's not like your fault he's caught. Yes, it is, Ellie cried. Anna gave her a confused, disgruntled look. I should have done more to save him. What more could you have done? Said Anna. Hargrath threw you in the sea. You're being stupid. Ellie wasn't listening. Her thoughts were haunted by the image of Seth, trapped inside a cell, being kicked and punched by inquisitors. Her tummy ached. He'll die without my help. I've heard he's the vessel, said Fry, puffing her chest out proudly. I heard they're going to kill him, said Sarah. Ibnit giggled. Yeah, kill the vessel, kill the vessel. You're the vessel, Fry cried shrilly, pointing at Ibnit, and the two girls chased him round the workshop, cornering between two bookshelves. Stand back, Ibnit cried. The enemy is about to burst out of me. He performed a gruesome pantomime, falling to his knees with a horrid gurgling sound, clutching his chest like it was about to pop open. Sarah and Fry fell about, laughing hysterically. Will you shut up? Ellie yelled. This isn't a joke. A boy is going to die. We heard you kissed him, Ellie, said Fry, grabbing a book of anatomical drawings from the shelves and leafing through it. I hope you don't get corrupted by the enemy. It wasn't a kiss. It was mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, said Ellie warily. Besides, that's not how it works. The enemy is only ever inside one vessel at a time. It can't move between people as it pleases. Once it chooses a vessel, it's stuck in that person until they're executed, or until the enemy can take its own physical form. We know that, said Fry, rolling her eyes. Ellie, is it true you've built a boat that can swim underwater like a fish? Said Ibnit, rattling a brass telescope against his ear. It's supposed to swim underwater, Ellie muttered. Only, well, it kind of just sinks. Can we have a go in it? We won't break anything, he said, rattling the telescope so hard it slipped from his hand. There was another knock at the door. Ellie groaned. She felt uncomfortable with so many people in her workshop. Who else did you invite? She said, glaring at Anna, who had cleared a space on one of the workbenches and was now slumped across it. Nothing to do with me, she said, her mouth full of apple. Ellie rolled the door aside, and Castian came hobbling in from the darkness, droplets of rainwater on his beard. Good evening, Ellie, he said, bowing. And Anna too, I see. And who are these mighty heroes? He added, smiling at the three younger orphans, who'd fallen silent, staring at Castian with wide eyes. Problem with your leg? Ellie asked. Yes, Castian sighed. Lord Castian's left leg was the pinnacle of Ellie's mother's engineering. Every time Ellie was called upon to fix it, she was both awestruck and distressed by its intricacy. Its insides were made up of tiny cogs and counterweights and moving rods, arranged in a mechanism so complex it made her eyes water. She tried her very best to mend it, but always with mixed results. Castian had never walked so well since Ellie's mother died. He pulled off his boot and rolled up his trouser leg, revealing the brass shell of the leg and foot, like part of a suit of armour. He undid the straps and yanked the leg off without ceremony, glancing about for some free workbench space to put it on. Ellie shooed Anna off the workbench she'd been lying across and took the leg carefully from Castian. The younger orphans sidled over, gazing up at Castian in reverent silence. Ellie wondered if they'd ever seen a whale lured up close. Sarah examined the wolf's head on his shoulder, touching its nose. Castian removed the killer whale's tooth from his coat pocket and placed it in her hands. A present, he said, and the three orphans gawped at the tooth like it was some holy relic. Sir, said Sarah, unable to contain herself, have you ever nearly drowned? Ibnit shoved her aside. Did you ever ride a ship through a storm? Fry shoved him aside. Is it true you killed a giant squid with just your bare hands? Castian held his hand up to silence them. Then he leaned down, favouring them with a slow, brilliant smile. Of course I did, he said. How do you think I lost my leg? They watched him in wonder, their eyes glistening. But the silence was too brief. With a violent shriek, they fell on each other in a heap, wrestling for the whale's tooth. I thought you lost your leg to a shark, Ellie grumbled, unscrewing the mechanical leg's outer casing. She was still angry with Castian for not helping her earlier. He shuffled his stool closer with a squeak of wood. Listen, I'm sorry I was so stern with you up in the square, he said. Are you all right? They're going to kill that boy, she said. Castian grimaced. They might find him innocent, he said. Ellie, you didn't know him before today, did you? No. So why do you care about him so much? I think she fancies him, said Anna, who was now stretched out on the floor. Ellie grabbed a blanket and threw it over Anna's face. It's because he's just a boy, she told Castian. He's innocent. It's not fair. Anna was laughing underneath the blanket, making it wobble up and down. Stop it. I do not fancy him, Ellie cried, giving Anna a light kick. Children, said Castian, slamming his head against a workbench. Ellie and the other orphans fell silent. Anna pulled the blanket from her face, holding it meekly to her chest. Castian's eyes were wide in the flickering lamplights. You need to understand how serious this is. If he is the vessel, then you must forget you ever met him, and you must not do anything to help him. People who associate with the vessel are not looked kindly upon by the Inquisition. He took a deep breath. After the 12th vessel was executed, his family was hanged too, because they'd been hiding him in the cellar of their house. His whole family, Ellie, except for his 8-year-old daughter. Because she was so young, said Anna. Castian's gaze fell to the floor. No, because she was the one who told the Inquisition where to find him. Ellie felt her chest tighten. Anna looked at the younger orphans. That's horrible, she said. No, it's necessary, said Castian. You don't know the power of the enemy. You've never seen it. He turned his cane over in his hand. He was silent for a long time. Ellie took a step towards him. Sir, have you seen it? But Castian just continued to stare down at his narwhal tusk cane. Ellie noticed his fingers were trembling. Then he sat up straighter and looked at the door. What's that noise? He said. Ellie heard it too. People were shouting outside. She felt a chill in her heart and rushed to slide open the door. The cheers swept in with the freezing night air. It's him! Girls and boys were running along Orphanage Street, crying up to the windows and balconies above. In the distance, a mighty bell began to toll. It is him! It is him! One girl skipped across the cobbles, trailing in the wake of her bright-eyed friends. Ellie grabbed her arm as she raced past. What's happening? She said urgently. That boy they found in the whale. He's the vessel. The High Inquisitors say so. Now they can kill him and we'll be safe again for years and years and years. Ellie's stomach twisted worse than ever, and she thought she might be sick. Seth was going to die. He was going to die, and it was all her fault. She had to do something. She had to save him, even if he was to be executed the very next morning. When is it going to happen? Ellie said. When will the execution take place? The girl grinned happily in the glow of the oil lamps. Why? It's happening now. Right, that's the end of chapter 5, guys. The plot thickens. It's interesting what Castian was saying about the vessel and the enemy, and it sounds like what they're suggesting, that Seth's been caught, and they're saying that he's going to be executed. So I'm very intrigued to see what happens in chapter 6 next time with Mrs. Withers. I hope you're enjoying the story so far. It's a real thriller. Never quite know what's coming next. All right, guys, thanks a lot. See you later. Bye.